Hello everybody, my name is Zen and welcome to my interface masterclass video. So every single time I've uploaded a WoW video, I get people asking me the same questions over and over and over again of what add-ons am I using and how do you guys get my interface? And I went back and forth for several months of debating whether or not to upload my interface as a package and just have people download it from there, which would be really convenient and everything. However, there is certain principles. In fact, there's three important principles that I've designed my interface off of, that if you do not understand those and you're not familiar with them, then the interface would seem a little disjointed to you, and things wouldn't make sense of decisions that I've made, and you would change them. But you would change them because you have bad habits that you are practicing, and you're just making it so you're enabling your habits that you're using. So instead, I've decided to make this video to teach you about those principles and teach you how to design an interface that's going to work for you, and one that you can save and have permanently for all of your characters. And then you can also adjust it individually and make sure that your interface is going to work for you. Not for me, but for you. So basically, this video is going to start from a low level. It's going to start just understanding interface and why I've decided to do this stuff, but it's going to end on a very advanced level, and we're going to work our way all the way up through there, because this video rather is not necessarily a way for advanced players to come in and just learn a ton of quick tips. It's actually meant for everybody across the board, whether you're a new player or a player that's been playing the game for 10 plus years, or any MMO for that matter, to learn about these principles and understand interface design. Because I will go on to streams, for example, and just see the most horrid interfaces that people are using, and I know and I can point out every single little individual thing that they could be doing better, and that would improve their gameplay immediately if they just fix certain things. So this video, at the end of it, you will become a better player, and you will understand how to make your own interface, and you will probably enjoy doing so because you'll understand certain things here. So let's just start off. This is me in my order hall. This is what I call my resting interface. Not a lot going on here. Obviously, it's very clean, but I don't want to get into the interface just yet. I want to talk about the add-ons I have installed. The first and most important one for this interface in particular, you don't have to use it. You can use different ones, but I use OSWguild. It is what skins everything. It's what makes things look pretty. It's why, say my character screen looks like that, or my bags look like that, and how it's transparent and everything. I've set it up to look this way and to be this very specific interface, but that's the most important. That's our meat and potatoes. They have a huge options menu with a ton of things. It's hard to find certain things, but for the most part, this is where OSWguild is controlled. So let's look at the rest of my add-ons, which are actually very few and far between. Use Auctioneer. That's a more recent install. I'm using it just to do auctions. But there's some other things here. I'll just slowly scroll down. Some of these are installed by OSWguild. A lot of them are actually. Others aren't, like Handy Notes or IceHUD are not. I use those as more of a convenience thing. IceHUD is an important one for this interface that I use, though. Scrolling battle text is also important. SCADA, it's nice. I use it. And I'll just go all the way down. Tidy plates, those are my nameplates that you see there. And we get down to the bottom, we have DBM and OSWguild. And World Quest Tracker, which is what I use to see all of the world quests and how I can quickly be like, oh, hey, look, there's order hall resources over there. But essentially, those are all of the add-ons that I use. You could pause it during my little scroll there and just see them. That's the only thing that I use. My interface in general looks like that. That is my interface. That's all I need to see. That's a principle we'll go over. There are some other bars that are hidden. You can only see them if you hover over them. There's a bottom bar down here. That is one bar. It's just set up so that the buttons overlap like that. There's another bar here and a smaller one here. Both of these have pretty low transparency or high transparency, so it's hard to see what's on them, but there's basically, this bar has my mounts and my enchanting and my hearthstones and stuff that I don't need key bound necessarily. I mean, I have my mount key bound, but things that I can just hover over and click on. And then this one here usually has macros and whatnot on it. But this bar has the rest of my ability. So essentially, this is all I need to see. This is all you need to see. I've done this for every single one of my characters, and all of them are the exact same idea. I have roughly 6 buttons, actually almost always 6 buttons on the top here, and then anywhere between 4 and 6 buttons on the bottom, being mostly my cooldowns. These are the abilities that I'm casting, and this is more of a new idea for Blizzard because they, in Legion, have cut down on the active abilities that you're actually using, and you don't really need a ton of bars all over your screen with every single ability and every single one of your trade skills on them, and they're all key bound. No, you don't need that. You need this. This is all you need. Now, there are some other abilities down here that I have key bound, such as Fell Rush, right? I have it set to middle mouse button. And then I have Vengeful Retreat on my Naga. I'll talk about the Naga in a second. But you see that I don't need to see the bars for those. I know where they're at on my bars. And you can see up here with using WeakAuras, I can see their cooldowns. So again, I don't need that bar shown because with WeakAuras, I can see the important information that I need. We'll talk about WeakAuras also in a second. We'll go over all of how I set this up and why. But I want to start with the principles, and we'll talk about the principles first. The first and foremost principle is that of a clean interface. Like, look, I could just look through the world, and it's like I'm looking into a window of another world. There's not all this garbage all over my screen that I don't need. And in fact, I can even hide more of this if I needed to. Like, I just don't need this. Hell, I don't even need the minimap necessarily shown. I rarely ever look at my minimap anymore, but it's there just in case I need it. So I just have it kind of tucked up in the corner nicely. So this is all I ever need to look at when I'm not in combat. I don't need all of my bars all over my screen. And importantly, when I am in combat, that's also all that I see. That it's not because, you know, I don't need to see all of the rest of it. It's just that I need to see this. I need to see the world, because in a boss fight or doing dungeons or PvP, you need to see what's going on your screen. You don't need it covered up by giant things like this or having 30 bars just across the middle of your screen in this area. It's not necessary. So a clean interface is the first principle. The reason why is because you want to have your screen not cluttered and you not overlapping and just covering the world behind you. You know, even my bars here, they're fairly transparent. If I zoom in, you know, you can see my leg behind these bars. They're not super transparent like these are, for example, where if I went over, let's say that fire brazier, you could see it in the background of the actual abilities. But those are hidden. I don't need to see those anyways. My main bars, I do need to see a little bit more, so I have them set to the exact transparency that I need. But you're not seeing me cover up most of the world with an interface of just gross bars or health bars all over my screen. You don't need that. That's the first principle, clean interface. We'll talk about that, how that goes for healers in a moment, but that's the first principle. The second principle is that of screen spaces. And what I mean by screen spaces is where you're looking at your screen at any given time. If you took the average WoW interface, just the default interface, you have several screen spaces. You have your bars. You have your character in the middle of your screen. The character in the middle of the screen is never going to change. That's always going to be one screen space you are looking at. So right there, you already have 2. You have your bars at the bottom. You have your character in the middle of the screen. You have your health bars in the top left. You have where your raid frames pop in the left. You have your minimap in the top right. And then you have whatever else things that you have on your screen. We're already above 5 screen spaces that you're looking at if you have other stuff. If you're just using the default UI, you know, you're on average about 4, maybe 3 if you can really limit it down. If you've, you know, tried to make a UI, you've probably limited your screen spaces down to 3. I want to take that idea and just destroy it by saying you only need 1 screen space. You only need 1, and that is to look right here in the middle of your screen. Boom, 1 screen space. I don't need to look at my mini map, especially in fights. I don't need to look at all that garbage. I can see the world around me. I can zoom out and I see the world. I don't need to look at my mini map. The reason I have it up there is for when I'm questing or if I really necessarily need to look up there. I don't consider that a screen space because I do not look at it necessarily in raids or anything like that. Now, you would say that this could be a screen space down at the bottom for me, but it's not because I don't need to see these. These 2 health bars here are my target, my target, and my target of target. That's all that I have down here. And the only reason I have these down here are because I want to see buffs. That's it. That's all. I just want, if I really want to click on someone, what buffs does he have? Oh, he has the same ones I do. What buffs does he? Oh, yeah, he also has the same ones I do. You know, what about that person there? Whoop, no, get back. Oh, they just have Sigil of Battle. That's it. That's all that I have these down here for. You want to know why? Because this is my health bar. My health bar. This is target's health bar. That's all you need to see. If you're a healer, we'll get to that in a moment. But essentially, I've limited my screen space down to one area, which is right in the center. Which means I'm not looking up over in this corner. I'm not looking up over in this corner. I'm not looking down at this corner. I'm not looking down at this corner. I don't need to see my chat in a raid fight or a boss fight or PvP. And I don't necessarily need... It's down there in case I need to look, in case someone's like, my microphone just broke or did Discord just disconnect me, yada, yada, yada. I don't need to look at it generally, though. So I'm not considering that a screen space. It's the thing I'm looking at, boom, right in the middle of my screen. So essentially, I have taken the screen space at the bottom of my screen, which normally would be your default bars, and have moved it up to the middle. I've also taken the health bars that would normally be in the top left side of the screen and moved it down to the middle. So I've condensed 3 screen spaces down into 1. Now, say you are a healer. Well, you can actually still minimize that down to roughly 1. Healers have it harder than most other people because they have to have all these crazy health bars. You can actually move those health bars down to this area in here. And you don't necessarily need, like for me, my DBM, can I open that up and see my bars? You'll see that my bar setup, move me. You'll see that my bar's set up here, but they count down over here, and when they get low enough, they come down over here. And they stack here. Now, you don't need your DBM bars there if you need DBM bars at all. If you're not looking at them, then you should be. But if you're not looking at them, then you can move them somewhere else. You can also make them more transparent, so that way you can actually kind of see more through them. But if you're a healer, you can put all of your health frames right there. It's beautiful. And then again, that limits your screen space roughly down to 1 spot, which is just right here, just in the middle of your screen, because you can keep your health bars or your action bars here. Or another option is to swap them. Move your action bars slightly down and then move your health bars, but that moves your eye line from the center of your screen down to the bottom center. And you don't want that. So you want some of your action bars here of what you're going to use. So like, if you're a druid, for example, you want your like rejuve and efflorescence and stuff there, and regrowth and healing touch, so you can see those on your bar. But then have your healing bars just right down here. And all that does, changes all of these screen spaces down to 1. We want to limit it down to 1, maximum 2. Maximum of 2. The final principle we're talking about here is memorizing key bindings and using key bindings. I know tons of people who have very specific ways of setting up key binds. I'm not talking how to set up your key binds here. I personally use a Razor Naga. It has 12 buttons on the side. Do I use all of them? Not really. You don't really need to. And the way that I'm going to describe that is as follows. You see my 6 bars here? That's 1 through 6. You can set up modifier keys. Alt, 1 through 6. Control, 1 through 6. Shift, 1 through 6. You can set those up to be the same bars. So let's say we do 1 through 6 buttons. Then we do Alt, 1 through 6. That is 12 buttons. Then we do Control, 1 through 6. You get the idea. It's adding 6 every time. And that is a capable way of doing it. You don't necessarily need a Naga. But a lot of these abilities that I'm using down here are off of my Naga, and so are these. So I'm using 1 through 6 on my keyboard. So I have WASD, obviously. And I'm using 1 through 6 to cast my abilities down at the bottom. And then these right here are on my Naga. So for example, that is a button on my Naga, that's a button on my Naga, and those are my last two buttons with modifiers on my Naga. Okay? Then the stuff down here is also on my Naga, my mouse, but it's stuff that I don't need to see. Like I know that this is a button on my mouse right behind my scroll wheel because I have a 2014 or 2015 edition of the Naga, which is basically the one that behind the scroll wheel, there's two extra buttons. So this one right here is one of those buttons. The other one is my auto walk. That's all it is, just my auto walk. And I have my mouse, or I have my Naga set up to use my keypad on my number on my keyboard and with num lock off. So that's why you see like left and like down, right? Because this is stuff that on the keypad is what that is, but it's just on my Naga. That's all I'm using. So I'm not actually hitting the down button or the middle mouse button or whatnot. I am hitting, if I push my scroll wheel down, that is my Fell Rush. And then if I hit number 2 on my Naga, it is my Vengeful Retreat. Why number 2? Well, number 1 is my push to talk for Discord. It's just a really convenient spot to have a push to talk. I can hit pretty much every button with my thumb on my Naga and push my push to talk at the same time. Or I could just release it for a quick second and hit my Vengeful Retreat. This Naga also has a feature where it has scroll wheel tilt left and right. So if I tilt my scroll wheel left and right, it also will count as 2 buttons, which is highly convenient, such as my Imprison is set to one of those. Boop. I just tilt my scroll wheel and it will use Imprison, which is a CC for the demon hunters. CC's pretty much demons or humanoids if you're in PvP. So there you go. That's how I have it set up. Now there's some modifiers I have. Like I have Control and Alt on my Naga to do some modifiers. So like this button here is technically number 11 on my Naga, which is like the bottom middle button, but I have it as Control and that button. So if I hit it like that, you'll see it. I use my modifier key and it uses that. Pretty easy. Same thing with Metamorphosis. It's Control and 12 on my Naga. But you can do this with Control and 6 if you wanted it the exact same way. And this is an important thing. If we go to key bindings, set up character-specific key bindings. Now, you want as many of these to overlap per character as possible, so that way you memorize them and you're not having to remember like, oh, I'm on my mage now. Oh, that's right, I set it up slightly different. Try to keep them as much as the same as possible. And all of these come from the multi-action bars and the action bars. Now, an important thing that I've done, the boss bars that pop up, like some quests use the boss bar, but it's usually just a bar that pops up with a crazy border around it. I've set that to F1. You don't need to do that. I would suggest binding the boss bar, though, to be essentially a button that you can reach very easily. So that's another thing is like you may be able to use 1 through 6 as your key binds, but you can also use F1 through F4. Now, I wouldn't suggest using modifier keys with the F keys, but just use like F1 through F4 or even tilde, the top right key, the one that does this, the one that does like that or that button, right? I use that as my interrupt button. So I can just pop that and it does my interrupt and I can see my interrupt on cooldown. All of this to be said that I know my keybinds, I've memorized my keybinds, and that's not something that you just do. That's not something that you just, play for a minute and suddenly you have all your keybinds. It's going to be hard to memorize your keybinds that you set up, especially when you only have this shown. Because you need to remember all the keybinds down here. And that's one of the bad habits I see people using. They don't necessarily actually have their keybinds memorized, which is why they have all their bars shown so they can remind themselves. Now, in theory, that's a great thing. But what that's doing is that's adding more screen clutter. You got to memorize those buttons that are down here, right? I know all these buttons. In fact, I don't even necessarily need to know all of these buttons. Like I've got my health stone down there for when Warlock's giving that, or Fell Barrage, which I don't even have spec'd into at the moment. But I do have my stun down here. I have my Fell Rush, which is a movement ability. I have Vengeful Retreat, another movement ability. I have my Fell Blade, which we'll talk about that in a second because that's part of my WeakAuras setup. And I have Chaos Blades down here just in case I need it, but I don't because it's a part of a macro that I have. Because I also have Nemesis, which is another cooldown, so I pop both of those at the same time. But essentially, that's all this is. It's pretty easy. It's just I have 2 bars set up, You don't really necessarily need more than that for your keybinds. If you want to mount, so let me run out here real quick. I have my mount keybound. I have it keybound to scroll wheel left. So I just tilt my scroll wheel to the left and it pops up my mount. Do you see my mount on here? No, because I don't need to see my mount. I don't need to see it on a bar. I know where my keybind is at to mount me up. I don't need to know where it's at on my bar. It's actually down here somewhere. Yeah, you see, I didn't even like necessarily know exactly where it is. I knew it was on the left side of my bar. I have my enchanting down here. I have my hearthstones down here. I can click my hearthstone. I don't need that keybound, right? I can click my disenchant. I don't need that keybound. It's nice to have a keybound, but I don't need a keybound. I have another mount here. It's my flying mount. I click that when I go to Orgrimmar. I don't have that keybound. I don't need to. But I have my normal mount that I use. Keybound. And it's hidden. It's hidden on a bar that's just somewhere down here. Interesting, huh? So, another thing. LVUI. If we go to action bars, most interfaces that use action bars have this kind of thing. You can change how many buttons are on the bars, and you can change the backdrop and everything. That's how I've set my bars up, is all to these interfaces. And in fact, I'm going to show you my anchors. This is where everything on my interface is. Ignore this bit. That's just, you know, the control method for here. As I accidentally hit one of my buttons on my Naga. You can see this is where everything is at. Like GM ticket frame, right? Don't need that on my interface. Don't need that shown. I have my player buffs. I have my player debuffs. Typical spots that they are on the default interface. Don't necessarily need to see those. Debuffs can be important. If you're a tank and you're taking tanking debuffs, you can set up a WeakAuras. Again, we'll go over WeakAuras in a second. Arena frames, pet bars, chats, right? That for LVUI, it puts the combat thing over here for your chat for that. I've just set it up so it's actually over on my normal chat, just like it normally is. But you see my health bars, my raid frames for DPS and tanking over here. Don't need to see them. Party frames over there. Don't need to see them as a DPS. If you were a healer, you could just boop right there. Just beautiful, right? And you could scale them the way that you need them to be and change them around through LVUI. So we've gone over the 3 important principles. I'm going to refresh your memory. Clean interface. You don't want clutter. You don't want to cover up the world behind you because you want to be able to see the world. You want to be able to interact with the world. If you're in a boss fight, you want to be able to see where people are running to. You want to be able to see the stuff on the ground. You want to be able to see what the boss is doing, what other bosses are doing. You want to be able to see where your tank is running. And you want to do that by not covering it up. Clean interface. Principle number 1. Principle number 2, screen space. You want to look at as few spots on your screen as possible. I've managed to limit it down to 1. This is possible as a tank and DPS. It's a little harder as a healer. I get that. Try your best. If you can, limit it down to 2. Pretty easy. And the way you do this is by having a centered UI. You don't want it over your character. You don't want it all over the place. You just want it centered. You want it clean. You want it nice. Something like this. Use Ice HUD. Set up health bars if you need to. You know, if you're a healer, you don't necessarily need this, right? You don't need to know what your target's at unless you're fighting things. You know, you'll need to know where your mana's at, and that's what I have for this. So like if I come over here, generate some fury, you see that's my resource bar there. That could be your mana. I've set this all up through Ice HUD. Ice HUD is just a mod. It's pretty simple to use. You could change what these bars look like, the shape of them, everything like that through their interface. Not going to go over Ice HUD. That's what I use for my health bars and for my resources. Boom. Easy. You can, again, as a healer, you don't necessarily need your health bar up here. You're going to have it somewhere else, I'm sure. This, again, is, as we said at the beginning, not for me to share my interface with you, but for me to share principles with you so you can make an interface that works for you. Okay? Final principle, memorizing your keybinds. These are easy to see. I got 1 through 6. If I forget one of these buttons is on 1 through 6, I have a problem. Then I have my cooldowns that I'm going to be using at any given time. And then everything else that I don't necessarily need shown, down at the bottom, hidden, gone, away. You don't necessarily have to hide those bars, but then that kind of betrays the first principle. So you want to have as much hidden as possible and just know where your buttons are, know where things are bound to. So now let's quickly go over WeakAuras. So if I do /WA, if you have WeakAuras installed, that's how you pop it open. That's all of my WeakAuras for Havoc. And I set all of these up for all of my characters. Now, what is this? So this is, as you saw earlier, if I close WeakAuras, that was, 2 of those were my 2 cooldowns for Vengeful Retreat and for Fell Rush. That's all that is. So I can see the cooldowns of that. I don't need to see their bars. I just need to see what their cooldown is at and how many charges they have, in the case of Fell Rush. If we pop back that back up, it's the same principle all throughout that. I got my stun cooldown. That's this big one in the middle. I have my DPS cooldowns, which I pop at the same time. So I really only need to see them when they're on cooldown. I don't need to see them on my bars. I don't need to know that they're there. I just need to see that they're on cooldown. And again, I have my interrupts. I have my interrupt on my left-hand side, and I have my Arcane Torrent, because I'm a Blood Elf, on the right-hand side. And then I've set these 2 up to remind me to cast those abilities. This one, for instance, I think it's called, what is the name? Fellblade. It basically generates resource for me, and it resets on certain attacks. And the same thing for if you're doing Vengeance, which is the tanking spec. You can get this as well. Most people do. I want to cast that on cooldown, so I have it set up that if it's off of cooldown, it's telling me to cast it. And then same thing with Blade Dance. I want to know if it's off of cooldown, I probably should be casting that. I could set one up for Fury of the Illidari and I-Beam. The reason I don't is because I tend to use those in AoE situations. Most boss have some kind of, AoE part to them. So I tend to save those as much as possible and then use them when I need to, unless it's a single target fight, then I'm using them on cooldown. But I don't necessarily need a WeakAuras showing up for them. Then I have a couple other ones. I have this up here. This shows me how much time I have left on Metamorphosis when I use it, which is my big DPS cooldown. This one actually shows me, and you can see these here. I know that's a lot to look at in WeakAuras. Trust me, it's actually a lot simpler than it looks. This one is for Momentum, which was a buff that a lot of the Demon Hunters were using. If you were Havoc, basically, when you use Fell Rush or Vengeful Retreat, the 2 abilities that I use to move around, increase my damage by 20% for 4 seconds. So I wanted to track that buff to time it with different abilities. And then over here, that's my Chaos Blades, which is one of my cooldowns. And I could just kind of see the time left on that one when I pop it. There's some other ones here that you can look at. These are all the ones that I have loaded for the DPS. I'm not going to show you how to necessarily use WeakAuras, but I am going to briefly just go over how to set a WeakAura up. So let's hide this so we don't have all that clutter. Let's set up an icon. So this is just a basic cooldown WeakAura. And let's call it Imprison, which is my CC ability. So let's set this up. So we want it to trigger on a status of a spell, cooldown progress of a spell. You could set it for many other statuses here. Or if you wanted to track a buff, you can track aura, and you just type in the name. So like Chaos Blades or Metamorphosis. But we're going to track a status, cooldown progress of a spell. And we're going to track, move my mouse out of the way, Imprison. Automatically picks it up. It's smart. You can move this wherever. Boom. Okay. Then we want it to load under specific instances, right? So we want it to load if I'm a Demon Hunter and if I'm in Havoc. That's it. You can have it load if you have specific talents, like my I always forget the name. My Fellblade is a talent, so I can have that load if I have a specific talent grabbed. But then we come over to display. We want to show the cooldown on it, and it's just that it's that easy, right? Then we close that, and if I cast Imprison, boom. You can also rescale it. So if you click on the new WeakAura, you just take it and scale it, so you can move it around where you need it to be. I like mine all kind of centered and nice and clean. There's also tons of other options here that you can go over, but that's all you need to do to set up a quick cooldown. What if you wanted to set up an aura? It's the exact same thing. So we just go new, progress texture, that kind of thing, like the one that I had over here. We do trigger, aura, metamorphosis, metamorphosis. Metamorphosis. No, I don't know how to spell metamorphosis. We're going to find out together. Boop. Oh, of course. Metamorphosis. And then that's essentially done. because it's set up as an aura. So when I cast Metamorphosis, it will pop up over there, load, all of that fun stuff. Easy, right? You can also just, if you already have something set up, so like say you have the cooldown one set up, or rather, let's say you have this aura one set up. Copy settings from another aura that I have, boom, it's good to go. And it'll copy it, and then I can adjust the spell name. But other than that, it's good. Pretty easy. Pretty easy. That's how WeakAuras works. That's a brief overview of it. But that's how I've set up all my, let's get that back up, all of my cooldowns and stuff. So let's do a little test bit of combat. Let's just run into combat, do my stuff that it wants me to cast. Oh, let's pop my cooldowns, right? Boom, boom. Now you see here, I can see the cooldown on Metamorphosis, so I don't need a weak aura for that. I can see the cooldown for my 2 DPS abilities that I've thrown out, right? Oh, we're about to take damage. Just pop my blur. You can see it's now on cooldown. Pretty easy. Not a lot going on here, right? And you see that, and this is the important thing that I came to do this with, I have scrolling battle text to show me damage. Damage that I'm doing is on the right-hand side. Damage that I'm taking, healing that I'm taking, left-hand side. You don't actually need this. You can set scrolling battles at or whatever it's called. SBT? MSBT. There we go. All of these can be found on Curse except for LVUI, by the way. So mods.curse.com, and just install the Curse client and do it that way. But I've set this up just from here. So essentially, is there a way to scroll area? Can I do boop? So you set these up from here. Notifications up here when I need them. Pretty easy. Essentially, you see how that all works. This is just right there. And you don't even need this. Sometimes you don't even need to see the healing coming in. If you're a healer, you sometimes want to see how big your heals are. If you're a DPS, you sometimes want to see how much damage you do. That's the only reason I have it there. But it's all clean and center, so that way my screen space is centered on one area. Pretty easy. That's all that you need to know. You can now go forth and set up an interface. So again, we're going to quickly go over the principles. You want a clean interface. You don't want to take up too much of your screen. You want only one screen space, maybe 2. If you're a healer, I get it if you want to. And you want to memorize your keybinds. Don't have things shown. Don't. This is like when you learn how to type and they tell you not to look at the keyboard. That's what this is, except you're literally making it so you cannot look at what those buttons are. Sometimes I forget some keybinds, and it's fine too. But for the most part, I have these and these all set up consistently across my characters, so I know those. Another thing, I know if I'm playing a mage, my blink keybind is the same as my my Fell Rush. My displacement keybind is the same that I use for Vengeful Retreat. Because then I know that when I'm playing my mage, if I want to move forward, I want to move out of something, the keybind is the same across the board. Same with my cooldowns. If I'm using a defensive cooldown, it's always going to be the same as this one. If I'm using a DPS cooldown, such as Arcane Power, it's going to be the same as Metamorphosis. So I try to keep things as consistent across the board as possible. I know some classes have very specific things they have on their bars that are, you need more of them. You need to see them. I get it. I know I have an Enhancement Shaman. I have a Windwalker Monk. I have, for example, my Mage, which has a ton of other stuff. So there's certain things that you'll need more bars here for, or different WeakAuras for. You can set up a WeakAuras for debuffs. Again, if you're a tank and you're taking a tanking debuff, you can set a big one up like right in the middle of your screen if you need to. That's an option. But for the most part, that's all that is. And just to quickly hop over, because again, I probably should show you this. In LVUI, you can set up different profiles based on your spec, based on your class. So I have a Vengeance one and I have a Havoc one. So if I go over to Vengeance, you're going to see my interface change here. And boom. So I suddenly have an extra bar down here, right? That's the first thing that you'll notice, because that's what I need to see. But for the most part, my WeakAuras are also much different. I have all of my my sigils down here, and I have my interrupts the same. Right? You notice how Metamorphosis is the same cooldown? A huge survivability thing. Fell Devastation is on kind of the same cooldown. Boom, across the board. Right. Makes a lot of sense. That was an item aura that I no longer need. Actually, I could probably delete that. Just get rid of that. But you see the rest of my WeakAuras are all set up. That's my taunt. This is my charge. So if I want to taunt something, I know the cooldown on that. I got my charge cooldown off over here. And the important thing is, again, just like before, I have it telling me to cast certain abilities. If you're playing like for example, an enhancement shaman and you want to have flame tongue up all the time, you want to make sure that it tells you to cast it with a couple seconds left, and you can set that up in WeakAuras. So keeping things on cooldown, I can see that it wants me to cast, well, first I want to cast that to get my resource, but it wants me to cast my Sigil of Flame. I have it set up to remind me to do that because I want that on cooldown. But then it casts it, and boom, it's done. But I also have my other sigils set up here, you know, so I have all my cooldowns. And all of my sigils are actually down here as keybinds, so I can, you know, switch between them. However, I do have a macro bar here, and this macro bar is set up. It's actually important, nice little thing. These macros, if you do /cast bracket at your character name bracket or at another character, the name of the ability, I can make it so whilst I'm, you know, I can target this and everything, right? And I can just throw it down wherever. I can actually put it directly below me with a simple keybind because I have it set as a macro here and I just cast the macro. That's all I did. I hope that makes sense. The other thing about it too is, and if you're playing a Vengeance tank, and you can consider this with your other classes as well, they actually have a thing that that was so it casts it directly under your, all sigils are now cast at your location. That's actually a terrible terrible talent because you could just do it with macros anyways. I'm not having to target it. And again, I'll put that macro back up so you can see it. That's how you set that kind of stuff up. But that's how I've set that up for my tanking thing. But essentially, you're seeing all of my WeakAuras are set up for different characters. It's structurally the same across the board. My shaman is the same as my mage. It's the same as my demon hunter. It's structurally the same, so I understand them. And my keybinds are relatively the same, so I remember them. But it changes based on my needs. So what I challenge you to do is to go and set up your own interface. You know, you can... It's going to take a long time, and it's going to take a lot of adjusting. You'll go into combat, you'll be like, nah, I don't like that, and you'll change it, and that's fine. You'll get that. That's going to be a feeling that you get a lot. So you'll want to do that. You want to actually go and test it out, test it on a target dummy or on, you know, actual things while doing world quests. But you want to set up your interface, you want to go test it, and then you want to make adjustments as you go. And that'll just be something you'll want. Another thing, just real quick, because I forgot to mention it. Make sure that your target cast bar, the cast bar for whatever you're targeting, is somewhere within this center area. So let me close out of that. If I were to start casting Hearthstone, for example, it's right there, which means I know it and I can interrupt it. And you want to be able to interrupt stuff, so have your interrupt on a quick cooldown that you can reach, or not a quick cooldown, a quick keybind that you can reach without doing anything. There you go. Go off, create your own interface, use some of the mods or more of the mods. It depends on, you know, your needs. Make an interface that suits you. Mess around with WeakAuras. It's very, very powerful. I would suggest using it. You can go Google like Mage WeakAuras, Demon Hunter WeakAuras, and people will have them pre-made, and you can import them by going to New and then Import, and you could just paste the text and it'll import it for you. And you can set up the load stuff for it. But other than that, I want to see your interfaces. So once you've gotten it all set up and you've created something that you think is good for you, and you've adjusted and you've made changes based on, you know, going into combat and seeing how it works and trying to get it to feel right. It's going to feel weird at first, but it'll feel right once you kind of start memorizing your keybinds and everything. Then go ahead and post like a imager link in the description, because I want to see them. I want to see what you've come up with based on the principles. Just remember the 3 principles: clean interface. You want as little screen spaces as possible. So you only want to look at one spot, and you want to memorize your keybinds. But with all of that being said, I hope that has helped. It will make you a better player using these principles, and we shall see you guys next time.